Hey everyone, thanks for joining our Beef Brunch news update for Tuesday, November 15th. Vince and I were just visiting right before we got on about the fact that it's chilly and it's wet. And I think he said y'all have had about 6 inches since y'all left Shreveport, Vince. I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
turn it over to you for that full update.
Yeah. Thank y'all for having me. It's from, we've talked about this feast or famine. We would had a dry fall and couldn't get ryegrass up, and now the rainy season's upon us. So, since last Saturday, we've had about 6 inches of rain in the general area where I'm located. So it's basically wet everywhere, but we're starting to see ryegrass fields green up. Um, hopefully, this don't stick around too long and we get a little reprieve. But it's going to be cold all this week, as many of you are probably up to speed with what the weather forecast is. I know in the northern part of the state, in the upper 20s probably for the next 3 or 4 nights. Here in central Louisiana, we had 2 big mornings of frost. Well, actually one on yesterday morning, um, and then this morning was borderline, and they're calling for uh, colder than average temperatures through the week. So with some rainfall, so it's going to be pretty tough on those cows that are not in the best body condition scores. So it's going to be best to fill them up with some hay and get some supplement out there to them, whether it's through the form of lick tubs or liquid feed, or if you cube in or whatever. This week's a good time to probably cube for 2 days and get some energy going. So, but the winter calving period is upon us. I'd say late fall winter calving period is upon us. We're seeing a lot of newborn calves out there right now, and I think Lee's going to touch on the market a little bit. The market had kind of slipped off the last several weeks, and um, it seems to have rebounded just a little bit, and hopefully we see some wheat country, greening up, and hopefully that entices our calf market at the barn. So, with that being said, producers are still questioning the high fertilizer prices and when and where and how they're going to apply it, and there's a lot of question right now on liquid versus granular and that sort of thing, and buttercups are coming up, and it's going to be time to spray buttercups here soon, especially on ground that was prepared seed beds for our winter grazing period. Starting to see it quite a bit. So that half pint of 2,4-D or so is not going to be very harmful to our clovers, white clovers that are out there. But will definitely give us some reprieve on those buttercups from that high fertilizer price, or them using some of that high fertilizer cost that we're going to have to put out there to green up this ryegrass. So um, a lot of cows being worked right now, going into the winter period, going to the sale barn as kill cows, open cows, and we we talked about this before a couple of updates back, that we're seeing a lot of open cows, and I'm not exactly sure what's contributing to that. And talking to 2 veterinarians here local, they're palpating some larger herds that there's a lot of open cows out there. So whether it's bull issues, but they seem to think it was related to some droughty conditions in the spring with lack of forage, maybe some conceptions that were lost due to lack of forage. Then we got into the heat of the summer, and then we had a rainy 60-day, 45 to 60-day rainy period, just compounded the stress. So um, we've seen a big percentage of low conception this year, moving into the winter, and I've even noticed it on my own herd. They're a little bit later. We put the bulls out a little later last year, but gosh darn it, they slow to come with calves, and I'm a little bit concerned that we had some of that issue with maybe some conceptions that were lost, due to some drought stress early in the spring. So it's winter feeding period time. We see a lot of tubs being shuffled around, lots of liquid feed being moved around. Uh, but by golly, try not to overspend, because it's all expensive right now, and that's the time of the year as a cow calf operator that we dread the most, with the cost of ryegrass plantings and the extra supplements. Visited one of my master cattle producers this morning, right around after lunchtime today, and he was concerned that he didn't have enough supplement out there with the weather coming. I said, well, the next couple of days might be a good day to cube. His cows are a little on the thin side, so get some energy going, keep them full. Make sure those calves got some got some milk coming, and that's going to be the key component moving into the winter period, is that those cows are milking. And naturally, our ryegrass stands are going to be delayed at minimum 60 days because of our dry period. Still, people still planting ryegrass. Today, I talked to one that he's putting ryegrass seed out. So it's November the 15th, and we're still planting. We're just able to plant ryegrass because of the moisture we're getting. But I guess it is what it is. But if you don't have it in the spring, it's going to be, we'll see some cattle that are undernourished and possibly some death rate as a result. So, which we certainly don't want to see. If they're not working for you, get rid of them. You can bring them onto the sale barn. They're still bringing a pretty decent price on cows that that have some yield to them. So if they're not bred, they're not going to work for you. So make you good riddances of them. So that's about all I have, and hopefully that we get some some decent weather after these rain events. It's sure been a struggle, up and down roller coaster ride, so to speak, all year long, from a dry spring, wet midsummer, and dry fall. Now we're going into a wet period, which is not uncommon, but we just didn't have the rains to get our winter forages established in a timely fashion. So hopefully things start to turn around.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to touch on just a couple of things or reiterate some things that he said. So the low conception rates, it's not just in Vince's area. We've seen those throughout the state. Lee's, I think, agreeing with me. Okay, now so you're shaking your head and then nodding. Some of that, like Vince said, it may not be the bulls. Some of them, I know, at least in some cases it was, or we're pretty sure it was. So just a reminder, Lee's been talking about different bull sales and things that have been going on. We're kind of pushing towards the end of those right now, but y'all need to be thinking about getting bulls tested for your upcoming breeding season. And if you're going to need some new bulls, be thinking about that. The other thing that I'm going to touch on, I was going to mention it later, but Vince was talking about supplement and the cost of everything. And last week we had Bobby Bingham on with us, and he did our webinar on grazing ryegrass and winter supplementation. That is posted, that recording's posted. We encourage you just to take the time to sit down and pencil out the different supplements that'll meet the nutrient requirements that you're deficient in. So go ahead and just take it. You can do the math on each supplement as a whole, what it's going to cost you, or what each nutrient is going to cost you. If you need help with that, if you need help finding some of those supplements, or you're not sure exactly what will meet your nutrient requirements, reach out to your local extension office, reach out to one of us, and we will help you with that. Again, just, we say it all the time, but it pays to think forward and think about that in advance before you really get stuck and get tied down. So with that, Lee, I will turn it over to you for our Northwest region update.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Very glad to be here with y'all today. I missed the last news update. I was tied up at the state fair, and so I was trying to remember back. It's been several weeks since I visited with you all, and boy, what a change it is since the last time we visited. Last time I remember, it was very hot and dry in our part of the world, and it's flipped over to the other side of the coin now. Highs in the 40s and 50s. 10-day forecast shows the highs don't ever reach 60. In fact, lows down into the 20s several nights, and that's really going to hurt us on this ryegrass and these winter forages, folks. And it's the same story up this way, Vince, as what you were saying down y'all's way. There's still folks planting some ryegrass here and yonder and about. If I had to put a percentage, if you look at total percent of folks that were planning on planting ryegrass, I would say that probably in the high 80s, if not low 90%, have planted already. And up until this cold event that we've been in the last couple of days, these winter forages looked great. We were touching into the 80s on highs, had some moisture in the ground. Nighttime lows weren't unreasonable, and that ryegrass was popping now. And it still looks pretty good, but we're early on in this cold snap, so to speak. We've had a lot of conversation about that today, in fact, about what this week's going to do for our ryegrass. I don't think that we're going to see as widespread a die-off as we experienced back last December. If y'all remember, last year was a tough year on ryegrass for most folks, and basically we were hot all the way into November and into December, hot and dry, and then it snapped and we went into extreme cold with a little bit of moisture, but it killed countless stands of ryegrass up this way. And I think some folks are kind of gun shy after what happened last year. I don't think we're going to see that after this year, but what you probably will see is this ryegrass kind of just standing still, so to speak, not making much growth headway. And that's really going to hurt us because we were already, we talked about this last time we visited, we were already a couple of weeks behind on this winter grazing, and this is going to delay us just a little farther as far as that goes. But we're very grateful to see the moisture. It's very, very greatly appreciated. Um, I wouldn't say that I've got a full market report by any means. Y'all are getting kind of the 99-cent great value variety version of a market report from me instead of the full meal deal with Jason. But just wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things. As of the recording of this on Monday, live cattle futures are up a little bit today at 151.57. Feeder cattle are kind of unchanged, but they're not negative, so I'll take that as a win at 176.95. And corn is down a little bit today. Posted some gains last week, but it's down at right now as of recording at 657. And you know, the cash market kind of drug futures down with it last week a little bit from what I've seen. I think we're seeing quite a bit of optimism in the markets right now. We've talked about this before, but I base that off of a couple of things. One's demand on these lighter kind of grazing weight cattle at these local sale barns. The demand's pretty good there, and prices are holding up pretty decent, pretty good shape for the shape they're in, so to speak. I'm also basing that off the replacement cow costs right now. Had a couple of little special cow sales scattered here and about in the country, and some of the numbers on some of these cattle, especially some of these F1 tiger stripe cattle, the right type and kind and bred just right and good body condition, they'll make you rock back in your seat to see some of these quotes on these cattle. And it's not just limited to the F1s. We're seeing some Brangus type or even some Angusy, more oaky type cattle. Black Baldies are joining in the party big time on these high prices. So the good cattle are bringing really good money. And what that tells me is that somebody's giving good money for them, and that person's got some optimism. They've got some optimism moving forward in the future. And they're, for the most part, I wouldn't say that I know everybody that's buying the cattle, but most of what I'm seeing is local people buying the cattle. So it's not like in times past, whenever drought hits Texas or some other western or northwestern state, we'll see some folks roll in and try to buy some cattle up and know they're kind of deficient on cattle, and will kind of artificially drive up the cost of replacement cattle in North Louisiana. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing a lot of order buyers roll in out of Texas. It's local people buying these cattle. The third thing that's kind of pointing me towards optimism amongst cattle producers is some of the limited bull sales that I've seen as far as the results there. We've seen bulls bring some pretty decent money. And a lot of times bull sales, you can gauge optimism real easily off of what some folks are willing to give on some of these purebred bull sales. I've seen some pretty good results from that, even in some bull sales in drought stressed areas. I was reading a report on an Angus bull sale out of Kansas and what it did, and I was kind of shocked that they're right in the middle of that drought country right now. May not be as bad as Texas, but they're still droughted out, so to speak. To actually talk to the guy that organized the sale, we were visiting, and he told me that right now, everything the cattle are getting, we're bringing to them. He said it's essentially like dry lot, no grass, no forages coming online or anything like that. But these droughted out areas do have quite a bit of wheat planted, and that kind of like what Vince was alluding to about the future on this calf market. If we can get some wheat up in these wheat grazing areas, and that's going to kind of gin up the demand, so to speak, on some of these lighter, more handy weight cattle that are built right and that are made for wheat grazing, so to speak. So got to take the good with the bad, and I'm going to remain optimistic on this market. I talked to a lot of cattle producers, and one of the phrases that most cattle people are tired of hearing is better prices are coming, because we've heard it for several years now. So I'm not even going to repeat that phrase right now, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if somebody tells you that, they're a bald-faced liar. But I will say that I do think there's some signs pointing to the positive right now. But as Vince stated, these input prices are just tearing us up. I've formulated and balanced more rations in the last month or month and a half for cattle producers than I probably have in the last 2 or 3 years total. People are searching, and they're trying to find something to alleviate these high supplementation costs, and they're looking at anything that's halfway palatable that will have any nutritional content for cattle. And so it's just tearing us up right now as far as these input prices. The price of oil and just everything related to inflation that's driving this market right now is just crazy. And I'm going to kind of wrap up and kind of shut down my rambling real quick. But while Vince was talking, I jotted down a phrase. I may have used it on here before, but it's something my grandfather told me years back. And I'm not going to say that he coined the expression, but I heard it from him first. He may have got it from somebody else, in fact, and it goes something like, you can't starve or profit out of cattle, but you can go broke feeding them. And so it's finding that careful, balanced line, providing for these cattle, making sure that your conception rates stay up there, making sure that you're weaning these calf that's of a good marketing size, if you are going to market straight off the cow, or even if you're going background. It's about keeping these cattle in adequate condition to perform this year in the year, to just go all out and keep your cattle in a 7 or above body condition score by any stretch of the imagination. But you got to provide them what they need, or else it's going to bite you in the pocketbook on the other side of things. With that, Ashley, I'm done. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you saving me on the market update, because I did not have time to prep one for y'all today. So thank you, Lee, for throwing that one together for us. I think, well, if you're watching this, you can see that Jason's not here. He's on his way back from Louisville, from the North American International Livestock Exposition up there. So just a quick congratulations to all of our exhibitors that were at State Fair. We ended up with good weather for State Fair. It got cold for the National Brahmin Show, if any of y'all were there for that. But congratulations to everyone at State Fair, and to all those kids that earned a trip up to Louisville. So we have, we call it our beef and our sheep educational trips. And so exhibitors are able to submit an application and earn a trip up to Louisville to be able to show at that. And they actually, I was watching it online yesterday, the sheep show, and I think they said there was 1,250 sheep that were up there. It was the largest sheep show that they've had in the history of NAIL. So it was, I'm sure it was a lot of fun and a good sight to see up there. So safe travels to all those people coming back. But I think that just in terms of the Northeast region, Jason would echo everything that Vince and Lee have said. So we've had some rain. It just depends on how much, depends on where you're at, scattered throughout the Northeast region. And weather and everything has just been very similar. All the conditions are very similar up here. Just a few things to wrap up for us. I do want to go ahead and mention, I did send this out on social media in the remind, but Dr. Twidwell has sent out the Louisiana Forage Conference information. So this is hosted by the Louisiana Forage and Grasslands Council, as well as the Louisiana Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative. So you do not have to be a member of either of those to register for this event, but it's always a good conference that we have every December. So it will be on Friday, December 2nd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. At the State Evacuation Shelter there in Alexandria. If you register before, doesn't have it on there, I think before I'll have to go back and look it up. There's a pre-registration of $20 if you get online and do that early. If you show up at the door and you've not registered, it's $25. Topics are going to be forage weed control. Jason's going to go and speak on our beef cattle programs. So is Dr. Strahan is going to do the weed control. They have Dr. Allen, hopefully I don't butcher this last name, Franz Lubers from USDA coming in to speak, as well as Chad Kaser with NRCS, Louisiana NRCS coming to speak as well. So again, 9 to 1 there. I do have the registration link posted in the video and podcast descriptions. And then also, if you're interested in becoming a vendor, you can email Louisiana Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative. I'm having a Monday. I'm getting tongue-tied. The LGLCI, you can send them an email. I have that linked there if you're interested in becoming a vendor for the event. Swapping over to our beef brunch. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have Bobby's webinar up. And again, that was on grazing ryegrass and winter supplementation. I know a handful of people were able to join us live. But if you missed that video recording and everything is out. It's on our YouTube channel in podcast form. If you have trouble finding it, let me know and we'll get that to you. The next 3 webinars that we have, so December's, January's, and February's, I think I mentioned this in the previous news update. Those will not be live. They are pre-recorded, but we will launch them on their respective dates, and so you'll be able to get those. In December, we have Dr. Hay. He's going to be speaking on improving maternal ability of beef cattle. January and February, both of those are coming from our Marketing Your Beef workshop that we had back in July. So in January, we have Mr. Boo Persica, who's our meat science lab manager. He's talking about the processing and or the harvesting and processing of beef calves. And then in February, we have Mr. Tyler Bro, who talked quality and yield grade of live cattle and carcasses. So both of those will go up for y'all. I think that's it that I have to round out for y'all today. Again, if you have any questions, send us an email or give us a call, and we'll be happy to answer those for y'all. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving next week. I have to think about that. We're hitting the holiday season, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone next week, and we will see y'all again in 2 weeks.